SECT Channel 12, your public access, so folks can watch it later if they couldn't be here. So we have Groton and London represented. Chris Conley at the 40th district, which is half of Groton and part of Ledyard. Anthony?
Anthony Nolan, New London District, the 39th.
Joe Delacruz, you're sitting in my district. I'm the 41st, Groton and New London.
So together, the three of us, Education Committee is a very busy committee at the Capitol. The three of us are on different committees.
Yep.
So we know the education laws after they came out of committee and when they came to the House and Senate. Everyone does have a handout. The acts of education that were passed in 2019, there's an awful lot of them. So we'll talk a few about some of our favorites. And then we'll have questions and discussion. We don't know everything about every law in Connecticut, so if there is something we don't know, we'll make sure we get your information and get back to you. And if folks watching at home, if you have questions, email or call us, and we'd be happy to assist. Our emails are all first name, last name, @cga.ct.gov. So let's start. My favorite law, didn't have to do directly with the schools, but it was a big issue that I heard about from parents, was the vaping. So I know our high schoolers were vaping quite a bit. I have a feeling some of our middle schoolers were vaping as well. So we passed a law that has cigarettes, including vaping, 21 and older, so that people will probably still smoke, but it's at least, we raise the age to try to limit the smoking and the vaping. I think a lot of parents don't know how much their kids are vaping because first of all, it doesn't have a smell to it. It's kind of easy to hide. It's small. And before, as part of the law, it also said that you cannot mail vaping products because a lot of kids would have access through the internet, get things mailed, box comes to the house, they might be home earlier than the parents are after school. They can open their boxes, they can have their vaping products. Now, the vaping stores are going to have to ID, just like liquor stores, and of course we know the system is not perfect, but it's supposed to really try to limit the vaping and the smoking, because neither one of them is healthy for you. And I don't think that the young people were fully aware of the dangers of vaping. A lot of young people thought it's safe. You know, it's just a water product, it's very safe. And as we know, we have a lot of children and adults who are hospitalized. We've had 6 people die of lung disease from vaping so far across the country. It's a huge problem. So if you're watching, don't vape, don't smoke. It's all bad for your lungs.
Yeah, that's a huge issue with a lot of kids that I know that just walk around blowing smoke and don't understand how much of it is disastrous that they're breathing in. They're fixated on blowing out the white cloud. A lot of kids are saying that they just like the cool taste of the of the different tastes that they come in, which is a huge problem I know with kids I talk to, both as a law enforcement officer and just becoming state rep this year. That kids are addicted to the flavor and the sensation of it, and they say that it's like eating gum. They feel like they need to go puff on it, just like they feel like chewing gum. So.
Well, on the vaping side too, from my perspective, we had folks that would call me because again, there's for every law you want to make, you're affecting somebody else. And that other person that called me was the vaping industry, the people that have invested in all these shops, and there was the new guy on the street, the new business that was filling an empty store. And from their perspective, that they were bringing something that was a business that was filling an empty place. They were very busy. They had a lot of folks visiting them. In fact, he asked me to oppose the 21 and over. I did not do that. I think that the longer we can keep somebody away from something addictive, the better. And he was so convinced of his product that he almost got to a point of saying that, I'm the alternative to cigarettes, and it's much, much healthier. And it could be more healthy than cigarettes. We don't know anything at this point, though. And when I said, is it more healthy than just breathing oxygen? Because the way that you're talking to me now, you're giving me this overwhelming feeling that I should be doing this, like to make me feel healthier and maybe run a little faster and lose a little weight. And, he said he wouldn't go that far. And lo and behold, a few months later, again, and this has just been a short time. It's not like vaping's been around for 60 years like smoking. This vape, or even longer, 60 years for smoking, but vaping is relatively new, and we're seeing catastrophic outcomes already. So I think it's very important that, for me, can I go into my health and curriculum one?
Yes.
That kind of segued into the one that I like, because the health and curriculum is really including kids into the 21st century, the health programs that I think are necessary. When you're talking about, when I went to school, and everyone in the audience here went to school, we didn't really talk much about sexual harassment, assault, the relationships of abuse, things that, not saying they never happened, and in fact, we say, oh, there's an epidemic of this, an epidemic of that. That's not always true. Sometimes it's just adults recognizing that we need to start identifying issues and talking about them. So we are seeing upticks in certain things, and people say, well, geez, when I went to school, nobody had that problem. Somebody in that classroom that was sitting across from you had that very problem, whether it was bullying or anything else. And I really think that bullying, which has been on my radar in a very intimate way. I have a nephew that's being bullied at school, and we're trying to really, not just work with my nephew, but work with the bully's family, because to solve this is not to just move students around and swap them from school to school. That, in my belief, I think sometimes you have to do that. But I think if we get a health curriculum that's based around a holistic approach for students to understand feelings, again, people used to say to me, oh, this guy's just a baby. These kids are weak. They're this, they're that. I can assure you that the kids that I talk to have a lot more to deal with than any of us three that are standing up here today did when we were in school, or anybody in the audience, or anybody that's watching today. I believe that the kids have it at least 50% harder than we did. I would have been a disaster with Facebook. And that's why I think we need to start really basing curriculum upon what people live in today. And it's far different than we did. And that's one of the ones that really grasped me, and one of the bills that I really wanted to talk about tonight.
That is huge, because we have a lot of youth that think that some of the abuses that go on, whether it be verbal or physical, is normal in the home because they see it so much. Getting called to domestic violence incidents and seeing how normalized it is for the children there. We're hearing before, sometimes in my line of career, before we even get in the house, we're hearing the fight, the knock down and drag out. And here comes the kid, just, oh yeah, they're in there fighting, officer, if you want them, they're in the back room. Or, it's a nonchalant kind of like behavior because they think that because it happens all the time, or because they don't really understand the seriousness of the incident, that this curriculum is going to be beneficial for kids to get to understand that it's not normal for people to put your hands on one another. It's not normal for people to degrade you. It's not normal for you to go to the hospital because someone got mad because you looked at somebody. It's not normal behavior. So I'm just glad that this is a part of the curriculum changes that are going to be coming, that are going to be offering our kids an understanding of that.
And the bullying, we refer to them in the Capitol as school climate laws. Some people got a little confused when we started talking about school climate and thought that we were talking about climate change, which is another issue we didn't talk about in the legislature, but is not school climate. If you hear school climate and you're listening to politics, that is bullying.
Yes.
But this was Rep. Linehan's bill, and she worked on it. This is her third year working on it, so it did take 3 years to get 51% of the House, Senate, and signed by the governor. One of the big issues that we have, not that it's a good problem to always make sure we're dealing with, is what things cost. When we talk about school costs and we do changes in curriculum, there's training, and when we do changes in curriculum, it is a mandate to towns. So to make sure that we are being aware of the cost, aware of the, if books need to be purchased, if teachers need to be trained, all the costs that go with it, it's not just for one town, it's for the entire state. And sometimes when we talk about curriculum, it takes a while, or other things with the schools, it takes a while so that we can make sure we have the costs as reasonable as possible, and that the need, if there are costs to a bill, that the need equates to the cost. So a lot of us thought the bullying certainly is worth a cost to make sure that kids know healthy relationships, that all ages know about consent. So consent with a partner, consent with your parents, consent at the doctor's office, that if someone's touching you inappropriately, how to verbalize those feelings. Different discussions for different ages, but to make sure that kids know what's going on with consent, what's appropriate to be spoken to, and if stuff's going on in your house, who is your trusted partner at the school system so that you can hopefully have someone to share those thoughts, share those feelings, and go to the counselors if you need to be able to get through. I know when we were in school, we didn't have social media. So when we left, when the school day ended, if you did something or you were being teased, because everyone got teased, if we were getting teased, you got the break.
Yeah.
Where even if you went to daycare or you went to someone else's house or you went home, you got a break. Now our young people, they don't have a break. They always have these darn phones with them, or they have the social media, the constant, did you hear that so-and-so fell down the stairs? Like, you can get teased about that throughout the entire night, throughout the next morning, and that constant information.
Yeah.
If it's something silly as you were clumsy and you fell down, or you tripped and you were clumsy, to something, as detrimental as someone sexually harassing or making things up or spreading rumors, it's really eating away at our kids and their feelings, and they need to know how to deal with it. And we need to, not only the parents in the room or the teachers, need to set the good example and deal with the bullying as they see it, but the rest of us, if you look at our social medias,
Yeah.
you probably see things that you say, wow, I wish my child didn't see that. We need to, as adults, set better examples.
Yeah.
I went to a meeting about sound healing last night, this is not even off track. It's funny because we talked about it last night, but the guy had brought up the fact that, that the human mind was developed with a fight or flight instinct, which served us well for generations, and now we're starting to rethink how does that operate and how does that work with social media? Because sometimes it's the physical, this is a scary thing, I'm next to an edge of a cliff or something, your instincts kick in, but when you're being bullied and it's social media and it's all these different ways that you're being touched, how does the brain react? And they're trying to incorporate all that now, they're trying to figure out how to teach that, and still, because the fight or flight you still need. But for this instance, like in a bullying instance, how does that really work when you go home and you're still being bullied? And a lot of times, unfortunately, that's ending up in kids either leaving school early or worst case suicide, which we see rising high in our times. And a lot of people will say that the school's job is not to be the family or the counselor, and I disagree in a lot of different ways, because I think they are part of the family. When my kid leaves the house and they're with somebody for 6 or 8 hours and come back, that's an aunt or uncle to me. You don't really need, they're seeing teachers and school nurses and counselors and gym teachers longer than they're seeing aunts and uncles at home. So it's important that they reflect, the curriculum reflects some kind of a holistic deal. And that's why we're seeing a lot with addiction and when these kids come through our programs at Community Speaks Out, that a lot of the times there's something missing. And they don't get to figure that out until they've already gone down some road or some path that has made their life very difficult. So, I don't want to keep talking about that one, but it is.
Anthony, that's who.
Being on curriculum, because that's the page we're on, one of the things that I was really happy to see going to come through legislation is the African American and Puerto Rican Latino studies. That's on page 7. And that is where the schools are going to start having to have a curriculum by 21-22 school year, and then by 22-23 the courses are to be offered in those 2 topics. I just thought that one of the reasons that I was for that is because I think it's a great idea to have the kids that are the black and brown students be able to learn more about their history than the schools are teaching. The schools are very limited on what they teach, I believe. And I think that this is a great way to involve more history in regards to what the kids are going to be able to learn in regards to themselves.
Well, we heard from a lot of folks across the state. We might have certain programs or curriculum here in our towns, but when we talk about the whole state, there are some areas that are not at all diverse in our state, where they're saying we don't need to do this because we have very few black and brown students, and that's not the impression that we want the state to have and our Black and brown students are certainly welcome members of society, and everyone, regardless of your color, should know the history of all of our citizens.
And it's not just for the Black and brown students, it's just
Everyone.
the Black and brown students have asked to be taught more in regards to their history. But it's also good for everybody else, because everybody else gets the opportunity to learn about a different culture also, or cultures. So I just think that's a better way for kids to learn and be able to understand why cultures are like they are, because of different things that people have went through, or different things that their family members have went through. The history is just so important, I think.
And that was a long, touching debate, but I
Yeah.
think we all learned something, at least in the House side, about how different communities are dealing with race and how they're dealing with teaching history. And I think it was, although it was long, it was very good.
Right.
Was. And then sometimes we make laws when people, we'll go back and people say, why do you make so many laws? Why were there so many bills put in? We don't get it. And I would agree, sometimes it seems like it may be overwhelming, but we always remember that every single law in this that we saw, somebody brought to it, whether it was constituent or it meant a lot to a legislator. Sometimes laws come in place where you go, that's a law already, isn't it? And the one where we talked about the comprehensive background checks for people that are working with school-age kids, was something that we all assume as legislators sometimes that, oh, that's a law already. You know, it's impossible for us to know every single law, but sometimes when something comes on the board, and again, when you look at this list, a lot of it is bipartisan. Hugely 148 to 2, or, because a lot of these things make a lot of sense. So I want to make sure everyone has the impression that at least when we're voting on stuff that seems to be protecting our children, that we are on board, that we are together. And the comprehensive backbone, I don't have to even say much about the bill. It was basically making sure that every community has the same standard in place. And we know on the other side of the river, in our own district, that a lot of things have happened where they're questioning how the background check was performed. And maybe these students who are going to be dealing with these issues now for their lifetime would not have done that if this background check law was in place. If the person that was not fit to be in that position was disqualified before they ever met the student. And that's what some of these laws and goals are. And that was one, again, sometimes things pop up on the board and we go, what?
Yeah. Right.
That's not, why did somebody put that up there? Somebody put it up there because it wasn't, maybe it might have been a law, but it was vague. And people were kind of slipping through the cracks and still getting positions where they were being trusted confidence of our kids, and had time where they were alone with them. So I think, that kind of a check should be expected. I'm sure we kind of expected that that's the way it was and found out it wasn't.
Right.
And there is a cost to that. Let's be clear, when people say, why do I pay all these taxes? Well, in our minds, and the majority of the folks in the House and Senate, that cost is very much worth it to make sure that our kids are safe. Another cost bill that I think was very important, and in the beginning of session, there was an awful lot of talk about it, and then the talk kind of died out by the time we voted on the bills, was teachers' retirement. The prior governor and the current governor wanted to shift the teacher retirement cost from the state to the town. It would save the state money, it would cost the towns and cities more money. And there was a lot of debate as to what is the right way to spend that money. For folks who don't know, the towns pay for the teacher salaries. The state does provide substantial grants to the towns to cover some of the cost of education, not all of the cost of the education. And the state also receives federal money that they pass down through the towns and cities to cover some of the cost of education. But currently, towns and cities pay for the salaries of teachers. The state of Connecticut pays for the retirement. So that dispute has been ongoing because of the cost of that. And people on the side that say that the town should pay, say, well, the towns make up these contracts and make up the salaries, and they pay for these salaries while the teacher is there, and then the state pays for the retirement. So it became a cost issue. What we were able to do is we all knew that whatever the state doesn't pay, our property taxes would go up, or the towns would have to decide if they didn't want to increase property taxes, what were they cutting from the budget, from the education or the town side of the budget to make up that difference. And it's substantial. It was several $1 million for our towns. we were able, through negotiation, to keep that offset, to keep this how it is, the state paying the retirement, the town's just paying the straight salaries. And that is something that although it was not, the end result was not as exciting, you know,
I
great
think
job.
that-
I think it certainly, the people in the town, the people who do the town budget, the people who receive the services, certainly are very happy that we're able to not change that law.
And that's one that's gonna slip through the cracks, like you mentioned, there's no meat to it. No meat, like on a rotisserie chicken. I mean, we're gonna get killed on these little nuisance things, these nuisance taxes, and people are gonna ask us about why we did this and why we did that. Ultimately, what we did was, with the state remaining responsible for the teacher retirement, we said the state is still responsible for education. I was on the town council. I was on the RTM. I remember getting the budget staying the same, $25 million, Mayor, when we were there together. It was $25 million when I was on the RTM in '01. Then I came back in '14, it stayed the same. So if you look at our charter, you will not find one spot in the Groton Charter where it says the town of Groton is responsible to educate every children school age K through 12. If you look in the Constitution that we have as the state, that's our charge. And I want to make sure we live up to our charge. And the one thing that we have to remember is if we ever let those costs go down to the municipal level, it will be rich town versus poor town. Because I can tell you this much, Greenwich has about $676,000 in valued property per resident. And you can match that up with Groton. We have about 67,000. And then we go over the bridge to my other district where it's only about $40,000 worth of property for every citizen. So you can see that they can raise money at a much easier rate. So if we, the state, walk away from our obligations, boy, oh boy, does New London and Groton have a major problem. And I think that's what we fought for up there. So when you see these other taxes, again, we walked into mountains and mounds of debts. We're relatively new. This is my third year. Rep. Nolan got elected in '18. But we walk into this pile of debt and we have to figure out how to pay for it. And we want to make sure, because as counselors, as RTM people, our feet were on the ground. We were in the schools. We know what they need. We know what they can't afford. And they can't afford a $7 million cut, which the TRB would have resulted in. So those are the types of things that we fight for at the state. And it will go unnoticed. And people, again, we're gonna complain about some of the other taxes, and I get it. But in the end, no one's going to celebrate the fact that we saved $7 million. And I say saved, we saved local property tax owners, businesses, homeowners from having to make up that difference. And I'm glad you brought it up because that goes unsaid way too much. And it was, to me, one of the biggest hurdles because believe me, if you get to a position ever up in Hartford and you're representing a town, your superintendents, your teachers are going to say, wow, if we have to lose $7 million out of a $25 million grant from the state, that is a lot of money to lose. So, and we couldn't do it.
And a town like Groton with 40,000 people had a $7 million cut. Towns and cities that have more people, the hole in their budget was exponential.
Yeah.
And again, the very rich communities, they would just raise their taxes. People would vote, saying, yep, that's fine, let's keep our good schools. But the middle income, the lower income, we don't have that ability to raise the taxes.
And the businesses that we do have would be more affected. So we have Electric Boat that is currently building an $850 million expansion project, and they make decisions based on what their predictive tax rate's gonna be. So if we start throwing $7 million curveballs at them, they start wondering, should they be doing it in Quonset Point, Rhode Island, or should half of the submarine be built in Virginia? And we have to make sure we keep a good business climate too, and that's all part of it.
Who wants to talk about that next?
Firearm safety programs for K through 12, page 14. Was one I got mixed views on because it lowers the age of teaching kids firearm safety. Not actually bringing weapons to the school or bringing anything dangerous in the school for the kids to learn from, but just to teach them safety, I believe was a really good idea to drop the age in regards to the kids. I think by going, actually rather than K through 8, it went to K through 12, just to try and develop a safety program because of all the violence that's going around. I think that was an important legislation to pass.
It's funny, I don't remember this one, but, because you, believe me, they are long nights, and you talk about a lot of stuff, but the mobile telephone electronic device used by school
I saw
bus
that
drivers.
too.
Again, another rule that you think would be in place already, that, hey, you know, you're driving 26 kids around in a bus through town, going over train tracks and through intersections, probably shouldn't be on your cell phone while doing it. But I think, you know, basically imposing higher rules or laws, or maybe firings. So those are types of things that,
There
again.
probably wasn't a long debate on that law.
No, and
They can't even use handheld devices or speakers
No, no.
at all.
No hands-free. No phones if you're a bus
So
driver.
it's not just holding the phone. You can't use the phone at all. No, nothing.
Yeah, so
So
you
that's-
need to know your route. You can't use
Yeah.
Waze.
yeah, so a lot of chuckling goes on between Republicans and Democrats in the House when some of these things come up, and they're seemingly just boilerplate, like, why are we even doing this? But, again, it goes to the fact, and this is my attorney, my personal attorney now, that we're friends, and we get to talk a lot on the phone, but, you know, there's always a reason for something. And probably, you know, it probably even covers us from some liability to a certain extent, and maybe even insurance rates when you're hiring a bus company. If this is a rule that's in place, if that lowers our insurance for a certain reason, then we go with it.
So I want to talk about Care for Kids. Care for Kids, for those who don't know, is our daycare, state subsidized daycare for low-income families. It covers children that are your biological children. It also covers folks who are fostering children. So 3 years ago in 17, when Joe and I started, we always have a budget issue, but we had a really bad budget issue that year. And one of the things that we had to do is we had to limit Care for Kids, so that if you currently had the program, you were covered. But if you were new, let's say your income changed, you got divorced, you got laid off, life happens, and you didn't qualify at one time, but now you qualify. The program was full. We couldn't accept any new parents, and we would hear stories from people saying, you know, I don't know what to do. I can't afford private daycare. I have to work. I don't have anyone to watch my kids that would do it for what I can afford, or where I can afford. I don't feel it's very safe for my child. I wish I could, you know, I don't feel comfortable. I'm always worried when I'm at work what's going on. You know, maybe the teenager down the street was just a little too young or too immature who was looking after their kids for a couple hours. So we were able this year, in that budget issue, we were able to, it was short, but the program was closed for a while. And in our second year that Joe and I were there, we were able to expand Care for Kids. And this year, again, we're able to expand Care for Kids. When Care for Kids is closed out, we get Anthony gets a lot too. We get an awful lot of calls, making sure that, and a lot of parents have to choose, do I work and provide, you know, basic necessities for my children and feel they're not safe? Or do I not work and not have the basic necessities, not have food, or need to be on more social programs to know that my children are with me and they're safe? So this, making sure that our lower income families their children are safe while they're at work, is a huge, huge program. Again, it does cost taxpayers money because we subsidize the daycare based on income, but it allows kids to be safe, to be in a structured environment, and allows parents to have a little relief while they're at work.
That's always I always look at, even as politicians, we get in that, you know, what is the cost of something? How much does this cost? What is it? And we never talk about results. We rarely do that because it's hard to quantify that some kid that was in kindergarten where the parent dropped them off to a place where they were getting real instruction with a real curriculum, and they advanced and became really good first graders and really good second graders. And the benefit of that, you really can't measure. It's really hard to put a dollar amount on that. But when you see the studies and the graduation rate, how it improves when somebody goes to a program like that, I think early spending it early and often is the best way. And I know people can say, oh, there's Joe again, he wants to spend all of our money. But really, if you can spend money early, if you can make sure people have access to early education, and that's one of the programs that really, really pushes that. And we get to see those numbers and those results And I think most people in the community would say, well, I would have loved to have this one when I was young and working, and my kids, I'm glad we would have loved to have it. Let's make sure it happens for our next generation. Because the fact is, we work more than we used to. 2 parents are working. And if we have programs that can actually help and get these students to a better place, because again, remember the value is if you're a kindergarten or first grade teacher and there's 2 or 3 or 4 students that are so far behind that you have to stop every time to advance them, if we can get them a little bit closer through early education, the whole class does better. It's not just those 3 or 4 students, we're helping an entire class at that point.
I think during that legislation time, that's when we had the bigger crowds of people from our districts coming there to ask us to support specifically bills as that. I think I counted 22 people from my district, which, is one of the biggest sizes to come up and really show face, because they wanted to make sure that was one of the things that some of us supported. So.
Yeah, 22 people from New London to take time off to go to
That's
Hartford.
huge.
That shows a lot for.
With their kids.
With their kids.
They came with their kids. Are you smiling because you were there? Or
No, I really know the group that organized them, though.
Yeah, but
They're
they
very
were
passionate.
they were there. A funny one to me was sunscreen application in school. That was a funny one to me. So there was a certain age that you were allowed or not. You couldn't put it on yourself. So they passed this law. Now kids 6 or older may put on sunscreen, whereas they weren't allowed to in a lot of our schools. So kids were going to school with sunscreen, and they put it on, and the teacher was telling them, no, you can't put it on, you got to take it off. And it was just, kids were going home burnt, at the end of the day. So I just thought it was funny that was legislation. Had to happen, but I'm glad it did, because some of the kids that mentioned it said,
Okay, thanks you.
Yeah, and again,
I got such a good reception on that one when I did a youth group. They wanted to talk about sunscreen and how they could put it on, versus.
And that really meant something to somebody, because somebody
Yeah.
sent their kid to school one day and they came back burned and said, the teacher didn't let me put this on.
Yeah.
So we had to make a law of it, but again, it had to go that way, and that's why it went. The other one, this one, the expulsion criteria, I think a lot of the ways that we deal, especially in our school district on the side of New London and in some of the inner cities, I get it. We just talked about how 2 or 3 or 4 students could just change the way that a classroom learns, change the way that they develop as a team. But we also can't have people at the drop of the hat being able to just get rid of a person and have them not come back to school. And we had parents that were concerned in coming to us that it seemed so sometimes random. Sometimes it wasn't the system that was the same, where one kid did one thing and they get expelled and another one did another. They're making a board. They made up boards where now they have to actually go in front of a board. There's a little bit of a process before you can just tell a kid that he is not allowed back in the school. Obviously, if the student does something violent, that just kind of sets everything in quicker motion to allow a board to get him out and move him to another place. But to just be able to get a kid out, and again, I think that sets back to what we're doing. We're learning at the state level that just throwing people in prison when they make a mistake forever and keeping them in a system doesn't do anything for our economy or the citizens or the safety of our community. It does none of those things if we're not making sure that they're getting job training while they're in. We're looking at schools as the same approach. If they make a mistake, how do you come back from that mistake? And a lot of times, and when we hear some of the stories, the kids that did something and got that second chance and were talked to and maybe got a little extra help, realize that they did have a second chance, realize that that it's a benefit to them being in school, that it is a privilege. Sometimes they take that second chance and they run with it and ultimately become better students. And that does happen. I mean, a lot of people think that none of those things happen. I've seen it. I've seen some of the results, because we see some of the studies and before we actually vote on these things and some of the testimony. And some were, you know, parents who would just said, okay, my kid, I leave him home during the day because I work during the day, and I know he was upset, and he went in and said some things, but now he doesn't have a school, and now what do I do? So, you know, we're trying to make sure that as a community, again, we step in together and we have a place for that person.
So we've talked for a while, there's a lot more laws in our handbook. There's a lot of laws the Education Committee was working through last year, and they weren't ready to be voted on by the whole House and Senate and be signed by the governor. So in February, when we have session again, those public hearings will happen and those laws will be worked through again. Some laws, it takes just 1 year to come through. I think the sunscreen law, pretty simple. Bring your own sunscreen, you can apply it if you're over age 6. But some of the other laws are a lot more complicated and they take several years to come through. Sometimes we have a law that we think works right now, and you find out 2 or 3 years from now either life's changed, systems change, and the laws need to be, someone's found a loophole through the background checks, because again, teachers did have background checks, but sometimes you have to tighten the loopholes, and we revisit a topic. So Education Committee, while we are not in session, a lot of people are proposing ideas, talking about topics, so I guess we'll open up to you guys if there's things you have questions on or things you'd like to change. And again, folks watching at home, if you have questions or things you'd like to change, please call, email, so we can know what you want and be ready as the bills are being discussed. Anyone have a question or comment? Yes.
I have a big topic to bring up that's kind of controversial. Joe, I emailed you a little bit about it, but we never actually met.
Okay.
Hi.
So if you don't want to be on TV, just,
Oh, yeah.
this will be the signal. Just tell us not to do it and we won't.
Oh,
push it.
it's okay. I'm going to be brave because I need to be on the subject. So this subject is about removal of the religious exemption for vaccines. So it's something at first blush, I think it seems really very simple, right? You know, that it's just a religious issue, or that if someone has a medical issue, they can get a medical exemption. My youngest, who I actually homeschool, actually falls in the middle. So she has a corn allergy, and we've worked really hard. She's not anaphylactic. It's really, really wonderful, but it's very hard to make sure, you know, so she found out, you know, there's corn in envelopes because she licked an envelope and got hives. You know, like little things like that. Lots of things at like a hospital or a doctor's office have corns. You have to like check everything when you go to the dentist or get a Band-Aid. There's Band-Aids she's allergic to. I mean, you know, these things that you never think about before you have a child with a corn allergy. But she's not anaphylactic, so she could never get a medical exemption for any vaccine, even though every vaccine has corn-based ingredients in it. Every one. And so vaccines are meant to stimulate your immune system. So what would happen was that if I give, you know, pretty much any vaccine has a huge, huge possibility that she'll become anaphylactic to corn. In our family, we also have a allergy to epinephrine. So she could have an allergy to an EpiPen. So, so saying, okay, well, maybe this is fine. She can, you know, maybe it's okay for people that she becomes anaphylactic to corn. And then she could have EpiPen. Well, she could also have an allergy to an EpiPen. That's something I don't want to have to learn. And if the religious exemption goes through, she will not ever be able to go to school. In Maine, there's a controversy right now because they took away the religious exemption. But they also took it away from, so my daughter wouldn't be able to go to college in Connecticut. She wouldn't be able to go to online college if we have the same law that Maine has. Or that they're trying to pass. They got about 75,000 people to sign that they were not for this law. Christine, you look like you were not happy with me.
No, I am. I think it's a good topic.
It is a good topic, and it's something that I think needs a lot of thought to be put into this. And when I went before, and last May, I went to the Capitol and I testified, and every representative and senator that was there heard the story about my daughter, and they all had the same response, like, oh, that was something I had never thought about. Honestly, I had never thought about it before I had a daughter with a corn allergy, and her allergy showed up very soon, very young. Anytime I would eat corn, she would get hives. And so from breastfeeding, not from just being near it, luckily. And so it's something that we have, kind of struggled with for a really long time. So, I'm happy to talk with anybody about it. I want it to be, a discussion and a respectful talk with people about it. Not, I think the media sometimes puts it into a really, black and white issue, and really, everybody wants healthy children and healthy people. That's what all of us want. But I really think that we need to put a lot of thought into this. Almost every kid I know, I have 4 kids altogether. So many of the kids I know have allergies, and then researching it, 54% of kids have chronic illness. So that's an illness that they can be managed throughout their life, so like an allergy or asthma, that kind of thing, but never cured. Like there's not a cure for asthma, right? Like it's something that's managed. And so that's scary to me. That's really scary to me. I want to know, what are we doing to help with that? You can't really go, no doctor can really give you an answer for that either.
Yes,
right?
the way I saw the religious exemption bill was on the religious side only. I still think they could have those medical, the medical exemptions. I mean, maybe in
And
Maine.
that might be a way.
And that's the way we would have to put it or craft it.
Sure, so the medical exemption, though, that state, Connecticut doesn't come up with what falls into that category. That's a federal, like a category of medical exemption. So there's like 4, anaphylaxis is one of them. I think if you don't have a spleen, I think is another one. There's like 4. And so that Connecticut doesn't have a choice with that. Connecticut also has your religious beliefs. If you don't think that I am praying every time, like if we go somewhere new or she tries a new food, because she has other food allergies as well, you're wrong. It's, and every single thing we have to think about, we have to, put a lot of contemplation into it. I've got.
So my face, I have a food allergy where I have anaphylactic. So when you started talking about anaphylactics,
Yes.
that's why I made a face.
Yeah.
So
It's no fun.
It's no fun.
No fun.
At 3 years old, mine is the first time I had the anaphylactic reaction. I don't remember it, but I'm sure my mother, if she was here, could tell you all about it. So that's why I think when this vaccine law came out last year, a lot of people said, let's just do it. Let's do it. And I spoke up in caucus. Usually our caucus is silent, but since I spoke up, I'll share what I said. I said we need a public hearing. This is a little more complicated than what maybe on the news, let's have a public hearing. And then others joined and said, let's have a public hearing. The vaccine's going to come up again. And what I've told people is I'm listening to the constituents. I've had people say, don't change the law. Keep the law as is. I've had other people say, change the law. So sure. I am still in the research phase of this law as to what the actual language possibly could be and what the right thing to do is the community. Our community, just the vaccine rates will come out again. Folks need to know that Groton, oftentimes our initial rates are a little higher than the community. It's because, be aware that with military folks, when they move, they have 30 days to give the vaccine records to the school district. The school districts send the records to the state, sometimes within the 30 days that a child has moved, because not every child from the military moves, right in the middle of August. Some children move a little closer. So when the initial rates last year were released, I thought, oh goodness, look at these Groton schools, the ones in my district, these military schools, the vaccination rates are quite lower than I thought they would be. And I reached out to the superintendent who clearly explained to me the rules and what the current status, the current vaccines were after they got everyone's records. In Groton last year are within the herd vaccine rate in our public schools of 95% of the children are vaccinated. Private schools, some of them a little different for whatever reason, but our public schools are in Groton within the herd mentality, the herd rate, and you'll probably see when they come out, if they're a little low, that is why. Our transient population, sometimes it just takes a while, even though parents have asked for records. We all know getting the records from the doctors to the schools is sometimes more complicated than you think it should be. So don't get too concerned. Our Board of Ed and our superintendent's very good about explaining the numbers without sharing anyone's personal information, but just saying we're still waiting on some records from folks who may have moved from a different country where they were stationed or a different area. But those rates will come up, and I do think vaccines are going to be an issue. So if you have strong feelings, pro and con, please reach out to us. If we're only hearing from 10% of the population, that's not right.
And that's where we usually base our decision on.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I understand what you're saying, and I know because that conversation for you came up down in Hartford.
In her, yeah.
So we know. Christine and I had some very deep talk in regards to that. But when I asked our constituents, you know, there was, I'm gonna say 64 people responded, I think. And probably 3 were the ones that were trying
sure.
to
Yes. Yeah.
be in the same position you were. So it's kind of, it gets challenging when we don't see the support for, you know, for not doing it
I understand.
versus for the support that comes out for us to do it, because they're worried that if it doesn't happen, that their children are going to get affected somehow.
Yes, yeah. I
You
think
know,
there's
so
a lot of
there's
vitriol
a-
going on right now. I
Yeah.
talked to about 10 moms today that were too afraid to come and talk.
And that's what happens.
And that is
People-
what happens,
That
right?
happens with everything.
And
on
every
here.
subject, right?
You
Every
know,
subject, I think.
People will talk to you, like, we'll get calls, and I know, because people tell, well, I don't want to tell nobody, but I called Rep. Cruz, and we talked about this, and your name came up, or I thought of talking to you, but before we talk, don't tell nobody, okay?
Right.
You know, people literally don't want their names put out there
On
because
anything,
they're
right.
worried that they're gonna get.
But the numbers, just the vax numbers that you mentioned, in our state, if 95, in our country, if it's 95% of the people that have their children vaccinated, that inherently, it's gonna be 200 parents against 10 parents
Yep.
saying, well, we did it, why shouldn't you? And I think what we need to do is we bring everybody in together so they understand the situations like that, so they understand people that can have adverse reactions to the, but I think, again, we call it herd, and it's actually a herd mentality too. It's, you know, if we all did it, or on the opposite side, a very small minority of the calls I got had to do with people sending kids to school that had very low immune systems
Yeah, yeah.
because of whatever disease they had or whatever they were fighting, whether it was even cancer sometimes. They were very concerned that they go in and their young one couldn't handle a case of measles or a case of anything. So again, but we have, you know, 95% of the people, and we have to always be cognizant of that 5% of the people who made that choice not to do it, but to figure out why they made the choice, and to make sure that they didn't make the choice just because they thought they were afraid of it, and bring them into educating them about it, or if it's a case where medically they can't do it, then as a legislature, we make rules around that to encompass that, and that's how I definitely see that.
And we have the ability to track our phone calls and emails, so if folks weren't as brave as you are to share your personal story, they can share it with us, phone calls and emails, and we don't share their information.
We
But
don't.
when we don't know when if we're voting on that next year, and we're saying, I wonder how many people reached out, we could just go on the computer and search the topic and see, okay, 200 people reached out, and so many people said this, and so many people said this, so if you have a strong feeling, tell us.
Sure, and I think this dovetails into, since I homeschool some of my children, some, you know, my oldest goes to Fitch, very happy there, you know. But because of that, so at homeschool, and so last year homeschooling also came up in the big education bill. The thing that was most bothersome to me was that Representative Linehan wanted the homeschoolers to register so that she could cross-check and give all our names to DCF. And that's what she said. I mean, it's written, she said that. That was why she wanted to do that. So that, you know, it's the assumption that we are abusing our children and neglecting our children by homeschooling, which in Connecticut, it's actually a parent's responsibility to educate their child, and they can hand that over to the state. That's what's in our Constitution.
So Rep. Linehan isn't here today, so let's not say anything positive or negative about someone who can't defend themselves or what their intentions
Sure,
were.
but she's also,
So-
one of the people who,
But she's not here today, so
She's
we're
not
not
here
going to
today.
use anyone's, I don't think it's
That's
fair to
fine.
use anyone's name who's not here. Because if
Okay.
she was here, she could say what she said or didn't say or what her intentions were before.
that's fine.
And if
That's
you
fine.
have questions for Rep. Linehan, please reach out to her as to if,
Well,
because
why
she's
would a
not here.
homeschooler want to reach out to her if she wants to give your name to DCF?
So, and.
Right, like,
Yeah,
that,
so
that
that's
is
one of the
really
bills that was very
mistrust is
controversial. But
really-
again, it didn't come up before the House floor because it didn't make it through.
It didn't make it through.
So the folks
I
who,
understand that, but do you see how it all kind of dovetails together? And I think it creates a division where there doesn't need to be. Connecticut's homeschooling laws are so great, and we have so many wonderful programs. And I feel like when my daughter went into school, school was great about it. I mean, maybe in other towns there's issues. I didn't find any here at all. I found everyone was really wonderful. They were really great, really supportive. She's doing great in school,
our communities here did not have, from the school end of it that I heard, did not have a need to know about the registration. Some communities are very small and said if we could have an entire class that we don't know about. And the school had wanted to plan just how many children could possibly walk in the door the next day for education. We have a very transient community here with apartment dwellers and with our Navy community that we often have to figure out what to do with an extra couple hundred kids. So in Groton, some of those issues are not relevant to our area, but I do appreciate the homeschooling bill I got a lot of emails, I'm sure, I don't know if you were rep then, I don't think you were, you would have gotten a lot of emails and calls. But it didn't come out of committee, and I don't think the bill that was written that I heard about was a good bill. And we didn't have to vote yes or no because the process worked, and that is the process, is a public hearing, so that people are pro and con can either go to the hearing, be brave and have their names on the record, or they can email, call, tell a friend, get their opinions heard. The committee votes, and then the House and the Senate votes, and the governor signs. And throughout that process, although it's slow, when you really want something to happen quickly, when you think you have a great idea, and we all say, gosh, this is taking so long. When someone else has an idea that you have concerns about that you think is a bad idea, the slow process is great because it can allow all those voices to be heard and all those points that are, I don't want to say, not points of contention, but things in the bills that aren't correct, concerns, things that can be fixed on areas that there can be compromised. It allows the time for that to happen.
And between the three of us, none of us sit on the education committee or the higher education committee. When we all took our assignments 2 years ago, I took the same ones. Soto was here before Nolan, and Soto was my guy when I'd keep calling him about education questions. And now I have other reps that I lean on. But when it's a big bill, when it means a lot, and we get a lot of calls, we will look down and we will read them. But a lot of times, I'll get calls on bills, and people will be vehemently upset because I'm a legislator. I've been elected, and I can walk up and I can put any bill in the world I want, no matter how, it could be crazy, it could be a good bill, it could be something that people don't understand or they're mad at. But once I put it in this little section of the state, if no one's a rep on the opposite side of the state, he's got to answer for it. Because it got a lot of news coverage and people are upset about it. So to me, because of, and again, when I first got in government, it moved so slow that I just couldn't, it was hard for me to understand, but I like the pace now. I like that we think about things. I like that Chris stood up in caucus. And again, I think there was a big wave, and I may have been caught up in it, and we were in caucus, and I remember saying, wow, Chris, why did you get up and speak about that? Why was that? And she had her reason for it. But she was there for a reason that day, because I think we had all gotten 1,000 calls from the herd mentality saying, not my kid. You better protect my kid. And they have their legitimate point. But I think a lot of us are ready to rush, and we would have missed or glossed over a situation that you're talking about with your family that would have did something detrimental to you. So that's why I think the slow process. But we also remember too, at the time, we were reporting at a rate that we had not seen for reported measles. So sometimes when a CDC calls you, when that will move a legislation.
And I totally
So that's when
understand
and again, but we don't want to panic and make decisions that are bad for everybody. But I also was thinking, from that perspective, of, okay, would I want my kid going to school right now if I knew measles were a thing? And at the same time, we have our superintendent or the school report comes out that we're on the lower side of vaccinations, which turned out to be not true.
Oh, the initial reporting was correct, but there was a reason behind it.
A reason behind it, correct, that they hadn't reported.
Right, yeah.
But that even gets me back to some of the other bills that didn't make it. They had proposed a bill last year to take, there's people in their minds that think that our problem with Connecticut education is that we're not like Florida and we're not like Houston. Because in Houston, the superintendent has 85,000 students underneath them. In this little town of Groton, we have our superintendent's only responsible for 4,200 students. They think that there should be a superintendent for New London County. And maybe but when you talk about things like what we just talked about, why is this one school affected? We want to, as legislators, as community members, we want to be able to call someone that's in charge of our kids and get an answer like that.
Within 2 hours.
Within 2 hours. Now, the people in Hartford had no idea why we ended up that way. It was an anomaly, but not for our superintendent. He knew because he works with the kids here. He understands the population. When Chris and I first got elected, and we were really proud of ourselves and thought that we did a good job, and were rewarded with a $17 million budget cut by a Democratic governor that we had to go up in front and just tell him that his budget was dead on arrival. Didn't make us popular with some people, but I can tell you this for sure. We knew what $17 million cut would do to Groton, and it would have turned it into a different place. And then on top of that, when we keep talking about what our education system looks like and what we want it to look like, I work with a guy that there was a budget shortfall up in Baltic, and it was only like $1.2 million, which sounds like nothing for us and our school budget, but for them it was a lot. The talk up there is combining classes, 1st and 2nd grade together, 3rd and 4th grade together. So the teacher's gonna say A, B, C, D, spell your name, and they're gonna go back and forth, and they're gonna mix, instead of 20 kids, 40 kids a class. That is not good education. And what he told me is, my son will never go to that school. And the whole purpose was to consolidate and make all these schools the homogenous and like the same, and we'll ship them all together and go in big cities. And he says, I went to that school. And the reason I bought a house next to that school is because I don't want my kid to go to school with 5,000 kids and 40 per classroom. Because I know I was successful in this setting, and I think my son will be too. So we have to think of all those things, because the one thing we can't forget as Connecticut is when you want to get down to the nitty gritty, we produce the best students in the world, in my opinion. They come out great. And the kids that I see up at Fitch and the ones that help in New London, seeing the work that they're doing and seeing how they advance, I don't want to change that. I want to become more efficient. I want to make sure that we're doing it right and we're spending the money and the money's going the right places. But that's what we do up there. And it's hard to do sometimes when people don't see the whole approach. And that money that basically most people will say, I think it was $100 million that we had a surplus this year. And the governor took $100 million and put that in a TRB. That could have been anywhere. And we'd just be scrambling wasn't it 100 million?
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. I thought you said no. I'm like, okay, it was 99.9.
Thank you.
Did you have a question? No. Oh, you're stretching. I guess I'm talking too much.
Does anyone else have other ideas?
TRB was a teacher's retirement.
Retirement.
Fund.
Thank you.
We need to fund more.
I appreciate that.
Is the teacher retirement, is it a pension or is it a 401k?
It's a pension.
It's a pension.
It's a pension, and it's still, even a new teacher hired now is
Yes.
a pension, right? There hasn't been that.
But there is very different payouts based on when people were hired and what. It's like Social Security. Like you can't, you have to be older to get your pension now. You have to have more years. I think it's 35 years of teaching to fully vest.
Yes.
So if you think of
35 years.
We have a retired teacher here to help us out.
Yeah, and it's very difficult, especially like with my situation, when I married a sailor, went away to San Diego and lived a good life for 3 years, and then came home, and teaching doors were closed at that point. There wasn't really any, and I'm a social studies teacher, so they're really not open for a while. It took me almost 9 years to get into public sector again. And so I didn't get into, I was 38 years old. For me to go and get 35 years, I would be 72 years old. And no kid would want me at 72, believe me. It's just not a pretty picture.
Yeah.
So, you know, that.
Also don't pay into Social Security
Right.
by a federal law, not a state law, but that means they don't collect Social Security.
Right.
It also means that if teachers, yes,
Yeah.
it's a federal law, please call your congressmen and federal senators.
It is not a good
It
thing.
also means that if you have a dual income household, and let's say one spouse is a teacher, another spouse was not a teacher and got Social Security, if the non-teacher passes away, you've lost that Social Security income.
It's gone.
It's gone. So you do have a lot of retired teachers who, although the concept of a state pension, a lot of times people have an idea as to how much money that is, the reality of how much money that is, because a lot of our teachers do not fully vest. A lot of folks did not work the full 35 years. Again, you have to be minimum 21 when you get out of college. It takes a while to get these full-time jobs.
Right.
Some people might take a couple years off for whatever life events, children, moved to San Diego for the service,
And all of the above.
all of the above together. So the 35 years is
It's really.
buy-in years, you have to vest.
It's really problematic, and it's something that I think needs to be looked at personally, because Rhode Island has a different level, and Illinois has a different look as well. My sister is a retired teacher out of Illinois, and I've got to tell you, they're much more teacher-friendly. You know, these people, at 35 years, I mean, even if you were 60, well, I retired at 60, and I'm fortunate, but I only had 22.8 years of teaching, and so I am only getting 44%. And I was, you know, that's not a whole lot, I'm going to tell you, and it's
especially
difficult.
if you don't have Social Security.
Exactly. Fortunately, my husband's still working, and you know, and then you have your insurance costs. So it's something that's, you know, for 6 months you get it at this low rate, and then all of a sudden you're paying over $1,000 a month. It's like, and you're only bringing home $3.
And right now, nationally, they say there's a national teacher shortage.
Right.
I would say there's not a national teacher shortage. I think we're having a very hard time convincing young college graduates who know how to do math
Yes.
that they're going to work 35 years, get no Social Security. They can easily do math and find out that it's not the career for them, that maybe they should go in the private sector. And I think that's terrible for us in a lot of different ways, mostly because people who are passionate about it, that wanted to go to school and teach kids and work with kids, are saying, you know what, I want to do that, but I can't afford to do that. So I'm going to go do this. And we end up with somebody that says, I'll settle for it. I want the summers off. I want, you know, maybe that's what drives them. But for most people, most teachers I meet, what drives them are the students, is the work, is really the satisfaction they get from teaching another person. And if we want to cut that and not pay that at a proper rate, we're not going to be as happy with the end result. And the end result is who's walking on our streets, who's hanging out with our kids, who we know, and who works with us.
And I think we're at that point now.
I do too.
I think it's something we really need to address. It's something that I'm very passionate about, but I really believe that if we don't turn something around soon, and I know the wheels of government as well as education move very slowly, but it's something that needs to be addressed now. So that's what I was going to say, that ask all of you to really look at that. How can we better address for teacher retirement and teacher recruitment?
And you're looking at 3 people that supported not moving to TRB, that supported paying for that are taking lumps for some of these new taxes that were created, that are covering those exact costs, and making sure that our local budget for the $25 million we get a year for the ECS is educational cost sharing, and every town gets a piece of it. We happen to get $25 million. We wouldn't have got that if it hadn't been for some of these new taxes. And again, I get hit on every single day. But in the ultimate end, we're paying our bills now. We're doing something in Connecticut that hasn't been done to me in 4 decades, 5 decades.
Has not been done since the 70s.
Since the 70s. We're paying for our bills. And we, like, again, we walked into an absolute incredible mountain of debt up in Hartford as brand new legislators. It's like, you know, and again, when we first got up there, they said, this is the worst it's ever been. This is the worst it's ever been. And I actually took full blame because anything I ever get involved in is the worst it's ever been when I walk in. It's either just my bad luck
It's all his
or
fault.
it was all my fault, but we are making moves. We refinanced the TRB, and then we didn't just refinance it this time. In the past, they've refinanced it and said, whoa, the payment's lower, let's not do anything. We refinanced it and we started putting more money into it to make a real plan to smooth that out and to make sure that it's not gonna be completely unaffordable. Right now, I think 30% of our budget goes to percentage owed and like not percentage, but to past employees, post-employment.
Yeah, it goes to
benefits.
debt. It goes to the mortgage on the state of Connecticut. Over a quarter of our budget goes to the state's mortgage. It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But we gotta pay our bill, just like if I don't pay my mortgage, I'm not living in the house very long before the bank's gonna realize that. We didn't pay our mortgage since the 70s and, well, the bond rating started to finally catch up with us. Again, another thing that we had surplus, we also had a big one-time fee. There was a federal law that was passed under Obama to bring foreign money back. Years ago, Congress decided we should make a limit that you have to bring some of the foreign money back to the United States of America. That hit last year. We got over $1 billion of money that different companies or individuals had in foreign countries that had to come back under the federal law. That's in the rainy day fund. We could have easily spent that and made a poor economic decision and said, yes, let's expand programs, or let's be able to do all the services that we'd like to do without raising any extra fees. But instead, we did the responsible thing, put it in the rainy day fund, because some of the economic outlooks for the next couple of years are showing that maybe we'll have another little dip. And if we had zero in the rainy day fund, that's bad economics. So it is, we're trying to do the right thing with the money, but again, we constitutionally have to have a balanced budget. And that means that we cannot do what the federal government does. We cannot go into the surplus. We also don't print money in the state of Connecticut. So we cannot do what the federal government does and just have trillions of dollars of debt. We have to make our mortgage payments constitutionally. We have a limit of how much we spend. We have a limit of how much we loan. So we do have to make sure that the two columns of expenses and revenue line up, but making sure we do what's right, because we do have a constitutional right. Every child in the state of Connecticut has the right to a free and public education. Some children and parents choose not to use the public education system. That's their choice. But every child does have the right here, and we have to make sure that we make the right the schools are appropriate for our kids, and we do the best we can for our
The
kids.
way the budget ended up, a lot of people walked away and said, well, you guys had an easy budget, you spent all the money you wanted, and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we did take care of some bills, but there's some other people on the outside looking in right now that we hear from. Ultimately, after any budget, you're gonna hear from people that were affected by the budget in really horrible ways. So like right now, I'm sure you're getting all the nursing home emails and because we decided, again, we were gonna cut the budget. Sometimes that means cutting Medicare return rates to the companies. The first year we did our budget, it was cutting Medicare rates, lowering the qualifying number from, if you make $2,100 a month or less, you're covered in Connecticut. They'll pay all your prescription costs because obviously you're paying your rent and your money's gone. Well, 2 years ago, we lowered that down to $1,400. And we had people calling us saying that they would be dead in 2 months if that bill passed, the budget passed as we did it. We went in and we changed that. So we're talking about going back now and working and tweaking some other things that, when you do pass one huge budget, some little things pop up where unintended consequence, like something that could have happened last year with your family, it comes up as this big, large issue. We say, okay, listen, we can fix that. And that's why it is fluid, a lot of the stuff we do. But remember, there were losers in that budget last year. We're not lighting cigars in Hartford with $100 bills like people would like you to think. We're looking for every nickel and dime up there. I feel that way. I feel like, I know the money I need for my town, but then there's a legislator that's in Waterbury that says, I can't lose a penny, Joe. I can't lose a penny. I got kids that they're not eating. They're not getting to school. They're talking about expanding classrooms. those are real issues to every community. And I know how I feel about it in my community, so I know how other people feel about theirs. And I haven't seen where we're just throwing money in a trash can. I know one thing, we did make commitments to start taking care of past mistakes. And it's gonna take a lot of energy, and it's gonna make a lot of people mad that, why are we paying for the sins of our fathers? But that's the way the world works in a lot of different ways. Because we have some environmental stuff to make up, and certainly the way, when we talk about teachers and having to go 35 years, that's applauded in Hartford a lot of times, that, whoa, it's these other people that got to retire, but we're creating a whole new generation of people that will never get to retire, so we won't have retirement problems. And that's not a healthy society either, because I think we need to get to a point where there's balance, and I think we are working back towards that way. I feel that way.
When you talked about the people that call in or people that leave you things in regards to us not doing anything, so we turn around and we try and take care of some of the things that were going wrong or that weren't being dealt with, and we deal with them, and now we're getting ridiculed for that. So it's almost like a situation that you can't win either way with some people, but I can tell you that, we really have a full understanding of working together to try and do what's best. And that's all that we can try and do is our best. Doesn't mean that things aren't gonna go wrong or that we're not gonna make mistakes and have to go back and fix them later, but I think the majority of people are up there doing their best, and being new for me this year has been exciting.
Yeah.
The drive up there is real powerful to try and make Connecticut the best. So I'm very excited to be there. And just so you know, my committees are appropriations, insurance and real estate, and aging. Though Representative Dela Cruz explained that we can pass a bill, or we can put in a bill for anything, but those are the committees that I'm on, just so you know.
Yeah. You good? I mean, does
I
anyone
just
have
want
any more
to say,
questions?
February, how it works for bills.
Oh, yeah.
So last year, we had a long session. Anyone can go in the computer system, put in a bill for anything they want. I could say, I want the state of Connecticut to change their name to, or whatever I want, the state of Christine. I could do that. Probably would not have gone anywhere.
It'd be funny.
This year is a short session coming up. We actually start in February. I was in meetings. I was at the Capitol yesterday for committees. I was in meetings today. We're all working all year round. Session is not on. We're not actively, publicly working on the bills. So in short session, we submit bills to committees. The committees then decide what gets heard for public hearing, and then the process moves from there. So if you have ideas for things that you think should be fixed, let us know. Our phone number, I'm sure,
Contact information is right up there.
yeah, contact information's over there for people watching at home. I have to read it because I don't call myself. It's 1-800-842-8267 is our 800 number. That's the general number. You can get a hold of all of us that way. Contact cards over there. Cody printed them. Also, you can go on our websites. You can get our emails. We try to be as good as we can, letting people know what's going on. But everyone does communicate the best they can.
Yeah.
A lot of folks have been communicating via Facebook.
Yeah.
That's not the best way to communicate. It's a great way to try to get someone's attention, but if you do write something on someone's wall, and that's the only way you get them a message, we're humans, and we might not be on our phones every second of every day. I hope not. I hope that sometimes if you might miss a post, so please, whatever's very important to you, please reach out. And if you feel like you didn't get a response, please reach out again. Sometimes we do have computer issues and we don't get everything. So the more we hear from you, the more we're able to help.
Yeah, you can Google your rep, state of Connecticut, and put your zip code and your street address, and they'll tell you who your rep is. And my cell phone number's on it. So when people tell me they can't get a hold of me, my personal cell phone number is on my page just because it's easier. Oh.
Joe, you always talk about how you support raising the minimum wage in Connecticut to compete with other states.
Yeah.
On the topic of education, do you see the opportunity of, you mentioned how we have a mandate to provide public education to our students. Have you ever considered supporting a bill to have like universal pre-K in the state? Do you see that as attracting young people to the state as well?
I do. I think we're in a competition. Well, our main competition is Massachusetts. So to me, I think if we're going to compete with Massachusetts, we've already done a couple steps. We've raised our minimum wage. We got paid family medical leave this year. A lot of people think of it as this big, this thing that you couldn't do, but Massachusetts did it, and their economy's thriving. So again, that's a great point. If you're a young family right now and you live in Montville, and you could just move over the border to Massachusetts, not over, an hour, and you're in Worcester, and your kids have access, you have access to health insurance, to early childhood education, all those things that mean a lot to families, and you can still see grandma and grandpa right down 395, you'll do that, and you'll make the decision, and we'll lose that person that can contribute. And we need workers. Electric Boat is hoping that we make laws like that. Electric Boat is want to make sure that, when the people punch out and they go home, that their families are being taken care of, because people will leave. Good people will leave good jobs if they feel like their family's not being educated the best way, or the healthcare systems in that city or town is not the best. They will move, and they've done studies and seen that. So I think it's something that we do. Again, it's our holistic approach to government, making sure that that's how we help businesses, by making sure we're helping our constituents. And I would definitely support that. You don't have to ask me twice on that one.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for coming out. It was great, a great discussion, and we ended just about on time.
Just
Perfect.
on time, yeah. And next Tuesday the road show will be in New London,
In London, at the library.
New topic though. Right?
5:30 to 7:30-ish at New London Public Library, if folks want to come
It's-
see us again, or tell folks who couldn't come today. Kate Rattell will also be there from Stonington.
And I've been working on my juggling, so it's possible that while we're doing it, I could be juggling. Just saying, if that raises your level of
Maybe
wanting.
karaoke too, you never.
Oh, I can karaoke.
Wow, now we might be over promising, but we'll be there.